The stars in this part of space looked wrong to Captain Jake Morrison. They were too bright, too close together, and arranged in patterns he had never seen before. After 18 months lost in the dimensional void, he had hoped their return to normal space would bring them home. Instead, they had emerged into an unknown galaxy. The USS Liberty drifted silently through the cosmic darkness, her hull scarred from the violent journey through dimensions that human science barely understood. The ship was small by military standards, only 400 meters from bow to stern, but she was packed with the most advanced technology Earth could build. Her gray metal hull bore the marks of experimental armor plating designed to withstand the unknown dangers of deep space exploration. On the bridge, Lieutenant Lisa Chen worked at her station, trying to make sense of the sensor readings. The equipment showed massive objects moving in formation nearby, but the signatures were unlike anything in their databases. The ships were huge, some stretching over 2 kilometers in length, and they moved with the precision of a military fleet. "Captain," Chen called out, her voice tight with concern, "I'm picking up multiple contacts. Large vessels, definitely artificial. They're moving in our direction." Morrison stood from his command chair and walked to the main view screen. The display showed empty space, but he knew their sensors were more reliable than human eyes at these distances. His crew had been through hell during their dimensional journey, losing crew members to spatial anomalies and equipment failures that defied explanation. They were tired, low on supplies, and far from home. The last thing they needed was trouble. "How many ships are we talking about, Lieutenant?" Morrison asked. "At least 20 large vessels, sir. Maybe more. They're still too far out for detailed scans, but their energy signatures are enormous." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Wells looked up from the tactical station. His face was grim as he studied the incoming data. Wells had served on 3 different ships before joining the Liberty, and he had never seen readings like these. The alien vessels generated power levels that dwarfed anything in the Earth fleet. "Sir, if these are warships, we're seriously outgunned," Wells reported. "Each of those contacts is putting out enough energy to power a small city." Morrison nodded slowly. The Liberty had been built for exploration and first contact scenarios, but she was also a warship. Her designers had learned from humanity's long history of warfare and built her to fight smart rather than fight fair. Still, 20 enemy ships were bad odds no matter how clever their tactics. Dr. Amanda Foster emerged from the science station, her tablet in hand. She had been analyzing the space around them since their emergence, trying to understand where they had ended up. Her findings were not encouraging. "Captain, I've been studying the stellar formations and energy patterns in this region," she said. "Based on the data, I believe we're in the Andromeda Galaxy, roughly 2.5 million light-years from Earth." The bridge fell silent. 2.5 million light-years was an impossible distance. Even with their experimental jump drive, such a journey would take centuries. They were truly alone now, cut off from everything they had ever known. "Sir, the contacts are getting closer," Chen announced. "I'm picking up communication signals. The patterns are complex, definitely intelligent in origin." Morrison returned to his chair and considered their options. They could try to run, but the alien ships were probably faster than the damaged Liberty. They could hide, but space offered few places to conceal a starship. That left communication or fighting, and Morrison preferred to try talking first. "Can we establish a translation protocol?" he asked. "The computer is working on it, sir," Chen replied. "The AI is analyzing their signal patterns and trying to find common mathematical references. It might take a few minutes." Those few minutes stretched like hours as the alien fleet approached. Through the view screen, They could now see the ships, as tiny points of light growing steadily brighter. The vessels were massive, their hulls gleaming with what looked like organic curves and flowing lines. They moved in perfect formation, their coordination suggesting centuries of military tradition. Chief Navigator Sophie Miller plotted their current position and the incoming fleet's trajectory. Her calculations showed they would be intercepted in less than an hour. The Liberty's engines were still recovering from the dimensional jump, operating at only 60% capacity. Running was not an option. "Translation protocol is online, Captain," Chen announced. "We're receiving a transmission." The main speaker crackled to life with an alien voice. The words were harsh and commanding, translated by the computer into flat, emotionless English. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Imperial space without authorization. Reduce power and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Morrison exchanged glances with his senior officers. The message was clear enough: surrender or die. It was not the welcome they had hoped for after their long journey through the dimensional void. "Open a channel," Morrison ordered. The speaker activated. With a soft beep, Morrison chose his words carefully, knowing that first impressions might determine whether his crew lived or died. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Navy vessel Liberty. We are peaceful explorers who have become lost during an experimental mission. We request safe passage to continue our journey home." The response came quickly, with even less diplomatic courtesy than before. "Earth is not recognized in Imperial databases. You will comply with boarding procedures immediately. Any delay will be considered an act of war against the Caltharian Empire." Wells leaned toward Morrison and spoke quietly. "Sir, I'm analyzing their fleet formation. It's textbook intimidation tactics. Surround the target and overwhelm them with superior numbers. But there are weaknesses in their positioning." Morrison nodded but kept his attention on the communication channel. The aliens calling themselves Caltharians had made their position clear. They expected immediate surrender and would accept nothing less. Unfortunately for them, Jake Morrison had not spent 15 years in the Earth Navy to surrender his ship to the first aliens who demanded it. "Mr. Wells, what's our tactical situation?" Morrison asked quietly. "Not good, sir. They outnumber us 20-1, and their ships are much larger than ours. But their formation is rigid, almost ceremonial. I don't think they expect any real resistance." Morrison smiled grimly. The Caltharian Empire was about to learn something about humanity that no alien species had discovered before. Humans fight best when the odds are against them. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced over the ship's intercom. "We are about to make contact with an alien empire that demands our surrender. As representatives of Earth and humanity, we will show them that humans bow to no one. Battle stations." The Liberty's crew moved to their combat positions with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment since leaving Earth, knowing that their mission into unknown space might lead to exactly this kind of confrontation. The ship that had emerged from nowhere was about to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. News traveled fast in the galaxy. Within 3 days of the battle with War Commander Vexitae, every major species knew about what had happened. The story grew bigger with each telling. A human crew had taken an old ship that nobody wanted and turned it into something that could beat Zenthari warships. Ambassador Patricia Green sat in her office on Earth, watching her communication screen light up with incoming messages. Patricia was a tall woman with gray hair who had spent 20 years dealing with alien species. She had seen humans go from a small, unknown race to respected members of the galactic community. But she had never seen anything like this. "Ma'am, we have another request for contact," her assistant said, bringing in a data pad. "This time it's from the Corvani Trade Federation. They want to discuss joint salvage operations with human crews." Patricia almost laughed. 3 weeks ago, the Corvani had called the alien ship worthless scrap. Now they wanted to work with humans to find more ships like it. "What about the Etherians?" Patricia asked. "They sent a formal request for diplomatic contact this morning," her assistant replied. "The High Council wants to meet with our best engineers and scientists. They're calling it a cultural exchange program." Patricia did laugh at that. The Etherians had ignored humanity for 50 years. They thought humans were too primitive to bother with. Now they wanted to learn from human engineers, but it was the third message that made Patricia stop laughing. It had come through the deep space communication network just an hour ago. The sender was listed as Devourer Collective. Patricia knew that name, and it made her blood run cold. The Devourers were not like other species in the galaxy. They were ancient machines that had been slowly eating their way through the outer rim worlds for decades. They didn't want to trade or make treaties. They wanted to consume everything in their path and add it to their collective intelligence. Every species was afraid of the Devourers. They had technology that was thousands of years ahead of everyone else. Their ships could repair themselves instantly. Their weapons could destroy planets. Even combined fleets from multiple species had only managed to slow them down, never stop them. The message from the Devourers was short and simple. "Humans, your shipcraft shows promise. We will test you properly. Prepare for evaluation." Patricia immediately contacted Captain Morrison on the alien ship, which the crew had started calling the Junkyard Dog. Jake's face appeared on her screen, and she could see the worry in his eyes. "They want to test us," Patricia said without any greeting. "The Devourers are coming." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "How long do we have?" "Unknown. But knowing the Devourers, not long. They don't waste time on empty threats." "One ship won't be enough," Jake said. "We got lucky against the Zenthari because they underestimated us. The Devourers won't make that mistake." Patricia nodded. "I've already spoken with Admiral Robert Kane at Fleet Command. He's mobilizing everything we have." Admiral Kane was a legend in the human fleet. He was a big man with white hair and sharp blue eyes who had fought in every major battle humanity had been in. If anyone could organize a defense against the Devourers, it was him. Back on Earth, Admiral Kane stood in the main command center, looking at a massive display screen that showed the locations of every derelict ship and space hulk within 100 light years of human territory. The screen was covered with thousands of dots, each one representing something that other species had thrown away or abandoned. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Kane said to the assembled fleet commanders, "it's time to show the galaxy what happens when you give humans spare parts and tell them it can't be done." The response was immediate. Emergency salvage teams were launched from every human base and colony. Ships that had been scheduled for routine patrol were redirected to investigate reports of abandoned vessels. Even civilian cargo haulers were pressed into service to tow derelicts back to human shipyards. Captain Morrison and his crew became teachers, traveling from ship to show other crews how to modify alien technology. Danny Rodriguez found himself explaining power core modifications to engineers who had been working on ships longer than he had been alive. Lisa Wong taught weapons specialists how to turn mining equipment into particle beam cannons. Amy Carter showed computer experts how to interface human systems with alien networks. The work was dangerous and often frustrating. Not every modification worked. Some ships exploded when their crews tried to push alien power cores beyond their limits. Other ships suffered complete system failures when human and alien technologies refused to work together. But for every failure, there were 3 successes. Human crews were taking garbage and turning it into weapons of war. A Corvani pleasure yacht became a stealth fighter when human engineers figured out how to enhance its cloaking systems. An old Etherian research vessel was converted into an electronic warfare platform that could jam enemy communications across an entire solar system. Even a derelict garbage hauler was turned into a mobile weapons platform after Danny Rodriguez managed to fit it with 7 different power cores. The alien species watched with growing amazement and concern. The humans were not just building a fleet. They were building a fleet from the galaxy's unwanted junk, and somehow making it more effective than anything anyone had seen before. "This is impossible," declared Zenthari War Admiral Kexmore during an emergency session of the Galactic Council. "No species can turn scrap metal into military vessels. It violates every principle of engineering and physics." "And yet they are doing it," replied Etherian Counselor Zephyr. "Perhaps we have underestimated human capabilities." The Corvani representative, a small gray alien named Viltar, was more practical. "The question is not whether they can do it. The question is whether they can do it fast enough. The Devourers are already moving. Deep space monitoring stations had detected the Devourer fleet 3 days earlier. 300 ships, each one, a perfect fusion of biological and mechanical technology. They moved in perfect formation through space, consuming everything in their path. Empty worlds became raw materials. Abandoned space stations were broken down and absorbed. Even asteroids and comets were harvested for their basic elements. The Devourer fleet was still 6 months away from human space, but they were coming. And when they arrived, they would find something no one expected. They would find a species that looked at the galaxy's trash and saw treasure. They would find humans who had turned discarded junk into the most powerful fleet anyone had ever assembled. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Junkyard Dog, looking out at the growing human fleet. Ships of every size and description filled the space around Earth. Some looked like traditional warships. Others looked like flying junkyards held together with metal tape and hope. But every single one of them was commanded by humans who believed that any problem could be solved, with enough creativity and stubbornness. 6 months, Jake said to his crew. "Think that's enough time to get ready?" Danny Rodriguez grinned from his engineering station. "Captain, give me 6 months and I'll show those Devourers what real engineering looks like." The countdown had begun. Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold window of the USS Liberty's observation deck. Out there, floating like a dead whale in the darkness of space, was the biggest ship he had ever seen. The thing was huge, maybe 3 times bigger than his own vessel, but it looked terrible. The metal hull was covered with dents and scratches. Parts of it were brown with rust, and other parts had holes burned right through them. "Sir, the scanning is complete," said Lieutenant Amy Carter from behind him. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and serious eyes. "The computer says this ship has been empty for about 500 years, maybe longer." Jake turned around to look at the data on her screen. Numbers and charts filled the display, but most of it meant nothing to him. He was a ship captain, not a scientist. "What about the metal it's made from? Can we tell what it is?" Amy scrolled through more data. "It's strange, sir. The metal is not like anything we've seen before. It's some kind of mix between ceramic and steel, but much stronger than both. Our computers can't even figure out how it was made. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez walked up to them, wiping his hands on a dirty cloth. Danny was a big man with dark skin and thick arms from years of working on ship engines. "Captain, you need to see these power readings," he said, holding up a small tablet. "This dead ship is still putting out energy. Not much, but it's there, and the type of energy is crazy. Our fusion reactor looks like a candle next to whatever is running inside that thing." Jake looked at the tablet screen. He couldn't understand the technical details, but he could see the bar graphs showing power levels. The alien ship was putting out more energy while broken and abandoned than some working human ships did at full power. "How is that possible?" Jake asked. Danny shrugged his big shoulders. "No idea, sir, but I want to find out. This could change everything we know about power systems." Jake walked back to the window and stared at the alien ship again. 3 weeks ago, a mining crew had found this thing floating in an asteroid field near the edge of human space. Word had spread quickly through the galaxy's communication networks. Ships from other species had come to look at it. The Zenthari had sent a scout ship first. The Zenthari were warriors who loved big weapons and fast ships. They were also proud and thought they were better than everyone else. Their scout had scanned the derelict for 2 hours, then left. Their report said the ship was ancient garbage not worth the fuel to haul it away. Next came the Corvani. The Corvani were traders who could find value in almost anything. They were small, gray aliens with big eyes who could spot a profitable deal from across a solar system. But after 3 days of scanning and analysis, they had also left. Their official statement was that the ship was primitive scrap with no commercial value. The Etherians had been the last to visit before the humans arrived. The Etherians were the most advanced species anyone knew about. They had technology that seemed like magic to most other races. Their ships could travel faster than light without, using hyperspace, and their weapons could destroy planets. If anyone would know the value of advanced technology, it would be them. But they had looked at the derelict for less than an hour before leaving. Their message was simple. "This vessel is beneath our consideration." So here it was, floating in space, abandoned by everyone who had seen it. Jake was starting to understand why. Up close, the ship really did look like junk. The hull was covered, with patches where someone had tried to fix holes. The engine sections were dark and cold. Several of the weapon mounts were empty, and the ones that still had weapons looked broken. But Jake had learned something during his 15 years in space. He had learned that one person's trash could be another person's treasure, and humans had a special talent for taking broken things and making them work better than they ever had before. "Amy," he said, turning away from the window, "get me a full scan of that ship. I want to know everything about it. How big it is, what's inside. Where the power is coming from. Everything." "Yes, sir," Amy replied, her fingers already dancing across her control panel. "Danny," Jake continued, "start thinking about how we might get aboard that thing. If it's been floating here for 500 years, the airlocks might not work. We might need to cut our way in." "Already on it, Captain," Danny said with a grin. "I've got some ideas about that." Jake smiled back. This was why he loved his crew. They didn't see problems, they saw puzzles to solve. Amy was one of the smartest computer experts in the human fleet, even though she was young. Danny could fix anything with engines, and if he couldn't fix it, he could build a better one from spare parts. "Sir," Amy said, looking up from her screens, "I'm getting some interesting readings from the ship's central section. There's definitely something active in there. The power source seems to be some kind of crystal formation, but it's like nothing in our databases." "Crystal?" Jake asked. Like a big gemstone? Sort of, but not exactly. The energy patterns are more complex than anything we've seen. It's almost like the crystal is alive, but that's impossible. Danny laughed. Amy, in my experience, impossible. Just means nobody has figured out how to do it yet. Give me a broken engine and some spare parts, and I'll show you impossible. Jake nodded. That was the human way of thinking. Other species looked at this old ship and saw limitations. They saw what it couldn't do, what was broken about it, what was wrong with it. But humans were different. Humans looked at broken things and saw possibilities. All right, Jake said, making his decision. We're going aboard. Amy, I want you to prepare a full computer analysis kit. If there are any working systems on that ship, I want to know about them. Danny, bring your biggest toolbox and all the spare parts you can carry. If this thing can be fixed, we're going to fix it. And if it can't be fixed? Amy asked. Jake grinned. Then we'll take it apart and build something better. The three humans stood at the window, looking at the massive alien derelict floating in the darkness. None of them knew it yet, but they were about to change the balance of power in the galaxy. They were about to prove that human creativity and stubbornness could turn ancient junk into the most dangerous weapon the stars had ever seen. But first, they had to get aboard and see what secrets the old ship was hiding. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Jake Morrison and his crew first stepped aboard the alien derelict. The ship that had once been silent and dark now hummed with activity. Human voices echoed through corridors that had been empty for centuries. The smell of welding and hot metal filled the air as Danny Rodriguez and his engineering team worked around the clock. The alien ship was even bigger inside than it had looked from outside. The corridors were wide enough for 3 humans to walk side by side, and the ceilings were so high that Jake had to crane his neck to see them. Everything was built on a massive scale, as if the original owners had been giants. Captain, you need to see this, Danny called out from deep inside the ship's engine room. His voice had that excited tone that meant he had figured something out. Jake made his way through the maze of corridors, following the sound of Danny's voice and the bright sparks from his welding torch. The engine room was enormous. The power core sat in the center like a small building made of crystal and metal. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Blue energy flowed through crystal tubes that were thicker than Jake's arm. The whole thing pulsed with a steady rhythm, like a giant heartbeat. Look at this, Danny said, pointing at a mess of cables and jury-rigged connections he had attached to the alien power core. The idiots who built this thing had no idea what they were doing. This power core is amazing, but they were only using about 2% of what it could do. Jake stared at the strange mix of human and alien technology. Danny had somehow connected their ship's power systems to the alien crystal using nothing but spare parts, electrical tape, and what looked like pieces from a coffee machine. Is it safe? Jake asked. Danny laughed. Probably not by any official safety standards, but it works. We're getting 50 times more power than the original owners ever did. Maybe more. Watch this. He flipped a switch on his makeshift control panel. Suddenly, lights throughout the ship blazed to life. Not the dim emergency lighting they had been, using but bright, clean illumination that made the whole ship feel alive. Jake felt a vibration through the floor as massive systems that had been dormant for centuries began to wake up. How much power are we talking about? Jake asked. Enough to run a small city, Danny replied, grinning. And that's just the start. I think I can push it even higher once I understand the crystal matrix better. These aliens built something incredible. They just didn't know how to use it properly. Jake left Danny to his work and made his way to the ship's laboratory section, where Dr. Lisa Wong had set up her research station. Lisa was their specialist in alien technology, a small woman with quick hands and an even quicker mind. She could take apart any piece of alien tech and understand how it worked, usually faster than the original designers had intended. "Jake, perfect timing," Lisa said when he walked in. She was standing in front of what looked like a large cannon that had been partially dismantled. Alien components were spread across several tables, mixed with human computer equipment and analysis tools. "What have you found?" Jake asked. "These weapons are incredible, but completely misused," Lisa explained, picking up a crystal component that glowed with soft green light. "The original owners used these as mining tools. They would shoot energy beams at asteroids to break them apart for mineral extraction. But look at this." She activated her computer, showing Jake a three-dimensional model of the weapon system. "With some changes to the focusing arrays and modifications to the power distribution, we can turn these into particle beam weapons that would make a Zenthari battlecruiser run away crying." Jake watched as the computer simulation showed the modified weapon firing. The energy beam that came out was thin and focused, nothing like the wide mining beam the weapon had originally produced. "How much more powerful?" Jake asked. "About 20 times stronger than our best military lasers," Lisa replied. "And that's with the conservative modifications. If I really pushed the power levels using Danny's enhanced power core, we could probably get 50 times stronger, maybe more." Jake nodded slowly. The implications were staggering. This old, discarded ship was becoming more powerful than anything in the human fleet. "What about defenses?" "I'm glad you asked," Lisa said, leading him to another section of the lab. "The armor plating on this ship is made from self-repairing nanomaterial, microscopic robots that can fix damage automatically. But the original programming was very basic. The nanobots could only do simple repairs." She showed him a piece of the hull plating that had been damaged and repaired. "I've been teaching them new tricks. Now they can analyze incoming weapons fire and adapt the armor to resist it. They can also redistribute the ship's mass to strengthen areas that are under attack." "You taught robots new tricks?" Jake asked. "It wasn't easy," Lisa admitted. "The programming language is completely alien, but the basic principles are the same as our own nanotechnology. I just had to figure out how to speak their language." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Amy Carter had been working on the ship's sensor and navigation systems. Jake found her on the bridge, surrounded by screens showing star charts and tactical displays. "Captain," Amy said without looking up from her work, "I've been analyzing the ship's computer systems. The good news is that I can interface our equipment with theirs. The bad news is that their computers are so advanced that our systems look like pocket calculators in comparison." "Can you make them work together?" Jake asked. "Better than that," Amy replied, finally turning to face him. "I can use their processing power to enhance our capabilities. Their sensors can detect objects at ranges we never thought possible. Their navigation systems can calculate hyperspace jumps with precision that would make our best computers jealous. And their targeting systems?" She paused and smiled. "Let's just say we'll be able to hit targets that other ships can't even see." Jake walked around the alien bridge, looking at the massive control stations and the panoramic view screens. The bridge was designed for beings much larger than humans, but Amy had somehow made it work. Human equipment was integrated with alien systems in ways that looked impossible, but obviously functioned. "How long until we're ready for a test flight?" Jake asked. "The basic systems are online now," Amy replied. "But if you want full combat capability, give us another week, maybe 2. Jake looked out through the bridge's main view screen at the USS Liberty, floating nearby. His old ship looked tiny compared to this alien vessel. More importantly, it looked weak. This alien ship, even half-repaired and jury-rigged, was already more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. "Keep working," Jake told his crew. "I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get." As he spoke, the long-range sensors detected movement at the edge of the system. Ships were approaching. A lot of ships. And they weren't human. The real test was about to begin. 6 months later, the Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory. 300 biomechanical ships appeared in perfect formation, each one a nightmare fusion of living tissue and cold metal. They had consumed civilizations that had lasted for thousands of years. They had destroyed species that had ruled entire sectors of the galaxy. What they found waiting for them made no sense at all. The human fleet looked like a floating junkyard. Ships of every possible design, size, and origin filled the space around. A small moon. There were converted cargo haulers next to modified luxury liners. Old mining ships sat beside former research vessels. Some ships still had their original paint jobs, while others were covered in patches and repairs that made them look like metal quilts. To any reasonable observer, it was not a military fleet. It was a collection of garbage that someone had forgotten to throw away. Devourer Prime, the collective intelligence that controlled the fleet, analyzed the human formation with growing confusion. "This cannot be their defensive fleet," it transmitted to its subordinate units. "Where are their warships? Where are their battle formations? This appears to be a salvage yard that has somehow achieved orbit." Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Junkyard Dog, which now served as the flagship of what Earth Command had officially named the First Human Salvage Fleet. Around him, his crew worked at stations that were a crazy mix of human and alien technology. Danny Rodriguez had spent 6 months modifying the alien power core until it put out energy levels that violated several laws of physics. Lisa Wong had turned the ship's weapons into something that could crack open a small moon. Amy Carter had linked the ship's computers to every other vessel in the fleet, creating a communication network that worked faster than most species could think. "Devourer Prime," Jake said, opening a communication channel to the enemy fleet. "This is Captain Morrison of the human fleet. You wanted to test us. Here we are." The response came back immediately, carried by the cold, mechanical voice of the Devourer Collective. "Humans, we have analyzed your vessels. You pilot converted civilian craft and repurposed industrial equipment. Your fleet composition violates all logical military doctrine. Explain this inefficiency." Jake smiled. The Devourers were already making their first mistake. They were trying to understand humans using logic. "These are our warships," Jake replied. "Every piece of junk, every abandoned hulk, every worthless derelict that you and everyone else threw away, we turned into something better. We saw potential where you saw problems." "Impossible," Devourer Prime responded. "Civilian vessels cannot match military specifications. Industrial equipment cannot function as weapons platforms. Your claims are logically inconsistent." "Then, let us show you what impossible looks like," Jake said, and gave the signal to attack. The battle that followed became the stuff of legends throughout the galaxy. The human fleet fought with a kind of controlled chaos that no military academy had ever taught, because no reasonable species would have tried it. The converted garbage scow Lucky Strike, which Danny Rodriguez had somehow fitted with 17 different power cores, unleashed a particle beam that vaporized a Devourer battleship in one shot. The beam was so powerful that it kept going and damaged 2 more ships behind the first target. a former Corvani pleasure yacht called Second Chance, had been modified by Lisa Wong's weapons team into a stealth fighter. It appeared behind Devourer, lines without warning, and launched a swarm of mining drones that had been reprogrammed as ship killers. The drones ate through Devourer hulls like insects through wood. The old Etherian research vessel Deep Thought had been converted into an electronic warfare platform by Amy Carter's computer specialists. It broadcast signals that confused Devourer targeting systems and made their ships fire at each other instead of at humans. But the most spectacular moment came when Captain Betty Ross, commanding a converted construction ship called Hard Worker, used her vessel's industrial equipment to literally grab a Devourer cruiser with giant mechanical arms and tear it apart like a child breaking a toy. The Devourers had never faced anything like this. Their ships were designed to fight other military vessels that followed logical tactics and used standard weapons. They had no experience dealing with humans who turned asteroid miners into kamikaze missiles, luxury liners into command ships, and garbage haulers into mobile fortresses. "This is not possible," Devourer Prime transmitted, its voice showing signs of something that might have been panic. "Your vessels should not function. Your tactics should not work. You are violating fundamental principles of warfare. We're humans," Jake replied, as he watched another Devourer ship fall to a converted fishing boat that had been armed with mining lasers. "We don't follow fundamental principles. We make new ones." The Devourer fleet tried to adapt, but adaptation took time, and humans were not giving them any. Every time the Devourers figured out how to counter one human tactic, the humans would try something completely different. Ships that had been cargo haulers yesterday were fighting like destroyers today. Vessels that looked like they should barely be able to fly were outmaneuvering Devourer fighters with ease. Lisa Wong, now wearing the insignia of Admiral of the Salvage Corps, coordinated the attack from her command ship, a former luxury liner that had been converted into a mobile weapons platform. "All ships, concentrate fire on the Devourer flagship," she ordered. "Let's show them what happens when you mess with human engineering." 50 different ships, all of them built from scrap and spare parts, focused their fire on Devourer Prime's massive vessel. The combined firepower was incredible, but more importantly, it was completely unpredictable. No two human ships used the same weapons or tactics, making it impossible for the Devourer defenses to adapt. Devourer Prime's ship began to break apart under the assault. For the first time in thousands of years, the collective intelligence experienced something it had never felt before: fear. "Retreat!" Devourer Prime transmitted to its remaining ships. "All units withdraw immediately. These humans are unpredictable. We must analyze this defeat and develop new strategies." As the Devourer fleet fled into hyperspace, Jake looked around at his crew. They were all grinning like children who had just won the biggest game of their lives. "Sir," Amy reported from her station, "we're getting congratulations from ships all across the fleet. Also, there are about a dozen species requesting immediate diplomatic contact. Apparently, everyone wants to be friends with the people who beat the Devourers." Jake nodded, but his attention was focused on Danny, who was studying the readings from their captured Devourer technology. "What are you thinking, Danny?" "I'm thinking," Danny replied with a huge grin, "that those Devourer ships have some really interesting power systems, and I bet with a little human creativity we could make them work a whole lot better." Jake laughed. That was the human way. They had just won the biggest battle in galactic history, and already they were thinking about how to improve on their victory. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Never underestimate a species that looks at your trash and sees treasure. And never, ever, leave humans alone with spare parts and a problem to solve. Because they will not just solve the problem. They will solve it in a way that changes everything you thought you knew about what was possible.